test ride was a little bit.
I feel like I'm losing my
I'd
mind.
never been in traffic on a
Is
motorcycle.
everybody in the
And the
world
class
blind?
was just in the parking
Please,
lot.
Lord, give
But
me
as soon
a
as I had my
sign,
endorsement,
a sign.
Hello my friends, and welcome back. This is Riding with Doug and the Delinquents, and today we're gonna spend some time with Mr. Dave Wellen. You've already heard my version of the story. Let's jump in there and talk to Dave about it. Dave, how are you, buddy?
Great, Doug. Good to see you, brother. So as Doug said, and I'm sure you've heard the story from him, but he and I are two of the original founders of the day Off Delinquents. Once upon a time, back in the day, Doug and I worked together at Pikes Harley Davidson, both on the sales staff, and we both had Wednesdays off. So us and a couple of customers decided that we'd like to go on some motorcycle rides. So we did that throughout the summer, and then when the schedule changed around October from 6 days a week to 5 days a week going into winter hours, we said, well, maybe we should figure out a way to coordinate, and maybe some other people would like to join up. So we created the Day Off Delinquents as a Facebook riding group, and grew from having 4 people at that point to there are over 460 people that are on the Facebook page right now. And that's been, what, about 6 years now, Doug?
Yeah, we're rolling into 6, right around the corner. So
It's amazing how time flies.
it's been fun, Dave. You know, when I first started, I didn't think I figured it'd be you and me and maybe 3 other people, and it's not 3 other people anymore.
No,
so.
but those original 3, the first 3 that kind of came on board, where I'm talking like Woody and Matt and some of the other guys, just they've all stuck around.
Yeah.
And others have come and gone. And just like any other group of appreciable size, you know, you've got a core of folks who show up on a very regular basis, and then you've got some people who show up on an occasional basis, and then you have some people who show up on a very irregular basis, and then you have some people who don't show up at all. So it's just like any other large group dynamic. But the core group of people that somehow we've all found each other and are riding with each other, it's been such a good group of people who have not just become riding buddies, but genuine friends, and participate in activities together outside of riding motorcycles as well.
Yeah, it's really been fun. Hey, Dave, let's talk about, so I'm going to give you the 2 or 3 basic questions that I'm going to ask everybody, and that's, of course, the first question is how long you've been riding?
It's 7 years last week.
7 years.
7 years last week. So I earned my motorcycle endorsement on July 9th of 2016. And I purchased my first motorcycle that same day. The test ride was a little bit intimidating because I had never been in traffic on a motorcycle before, and the class was just in the parking lot. But as soon as I had my endorsement, they slapped me on the butt and they sent me out on the road, and I came back and I was nervous as all get out, and came back and bought my first one, which actually looked very remarkably similar to this one. Same kind of paint scheme.
Right.
That was a 2016 Softail Slim S. This is now my 5th motorcycle over the past 7 years, so I'm keeping up with the average of people will keep their motorcycle for about 2.1 years in the industry. But this is bike number 2 in my garage right now. So
Right.
this is my 5th one, but I now have 2.
And we definitely want to talk about this bike, and we're going to get to that. Don't get ahead of me now. So tell me, tell me the bikes that you've had from bike 1 to bike 7.
So first one was a 2016 Harley Davidson Softail Slim S, and that was in the olive gold denim with US Star paint scheme. That had the Screaming Eagle 110, which at that time was the biggest motor that Harley Davidson put into their production motorcycles. So I went big and then I went home.
And I'm guessing that's the reason you got this color?
Yeah, I fell in love with it. When I saw it, it just struck me. I had traded that motorcycle in after 18 months for my second one. So that one's not still in my possession anymore, but it has stayed close. One of our other delinquents, Larry, still rides that motorcycle. So I get to see her on a fairly regular basis. So that's good.
That's fair. That's completely fair.
But I had put 18,000 miles on that first motorcycle in 18 months. And a lot of folks, maybe Doug included, was like, hey, Dave, why don't you just get a touring bike? Because you're doing all this riding and you're touring and you're putting ammo cans as saddlebags and a windshield and trying to put a stereo on this thing. You're trying to turn it into a touring bike, and it was never going to be a touring bike. So I said I'll get a touring bike when I see one that's as cool as my bike, and that happened in November of 2017. At that point in time, Harley Davidson was releasing the new model year in about late August, and we had in November a drop dead gorgeous 115th anniversary Street Glide show up in the Legend Blue and Vivid Black, and I traded my Softail Slim S on that one, and then I proceeded to put 47,107 miles on that motorcycle before I traded in for a 2022 Road Glide Special in Reef Blue and Vivid Black on January 5th of 2022. When that motorcycle showed up, it showed up before Harley actually did their release of 2022 model year, and everybody who works at Pikes Peak Harley Davidson and saw that motorcycle came to my office and said, Dave, you need to see this bike. It's you. It's absolutely you. So I went and back and saw it and went, whew, and had to have it. So I traded in my Street Glide for the Road Glide Special. In between those two bikes, I also purchased another motorcycle in February of 2021. That was my second bike, to have two in the garage. And an incredible opportunity came along for me to purchase another motorcycle brand that we represent at Pikes Peak Harley Davidson, called a 2021 Zero DSR. So Zero Motorcycles is an American motorcycle company based in Southern California. And this was a dual sport electric motorcycle. So last Saturday, the 8th of July, which is 7 years almost to the day of when I bought my first motorcycle and had earned my motorcycle endorsement, I bought this one. This is a 2022 Harley Davidson Pan America Special. Adventure touring, dual sport, whatever you want to call it, but this is a legitimate touring bike, and I'm very much looking forward to that first Texas run on this motorcycle. So that's the 5 right there.
And we've seen a little bit of change. You start to see Harley Davidson motorcycle riders get into a little bit of that dual sport. I think the overall field of motorcycles is changing a little bit, and we're getting a little more variety, if you will, when it comes to what's considered a tour bike, really, right?
Absolutely. And every morning I would do my job search, and then every afternoon I would get on my motorcycle to go get remotivated and get right in the right mindset. And I wanted to ride, but I didn't want to ride far. So invariably I would end up at Pikes Peak Harley Davidson, because that's where people who love motorcycles hang out. Yeah. And I love people who love motorcycles, and I love talking about motorcycles, and I love talking about rides, and I love talking about the differences between different motorcycles. And so every afternoon I would hang out at Pikes Peak Harley Davidson. And then finally, after a couple of months of that, and me befriending all the staff and motor clothes and the sales department and service and parts and some of the technicians in the back even, finally they asked me, Dave, you're here more than some of the people that we pay to be here? Why? And so I told my story, and they said, well, have you ever thought about selling motorcycles? And I said, well, how much does it pay? And they said, well, it's minimum wage hourly or commissions, whichever's greater. I said, well, let me look at my bank account. I don't have any dollars coming in right now, so some dollars sounds better than no dollars. I'll give it a go until I find my next grown-up job. Well, I still haven't found my next grown-up job, and here we are 6.5 years later. Harley, back in the day, long time ago, used to play in the dirt with the flat track racing, and they used to do enduro trials, basically with what you could consider to be a Sportster with knobby tires on it. And but Harley got out of that game for a while, but back in 2021 they brought the Pan America and the Pan America Special to the marketplace to directly compete with some of the big boys in that adventure bike marketplace, like BMW, like Ducati, like KLR, and like Triumph. And they absolutely knocked it out of the park. And the Pan America Special won Bike of the Year in multiple motorcycle publications, both in print and online. And I absolutely see why. When I initially test rode one before their release up at a Harley Davidson training event in Denver, I think the exact quote was, when I got back to the dealership, hey, if you guys can figure out how to put a Rockford Fosgate sound system on this thing, I'll trade in both my Street Glide and my Zero. And they couldn't figure out how to put a Rockford Fosgate system on it, so now I have a Rockford Fosgate system on my Road Glide Special, and I have Bluetooth stereo on this motorcycle.
Well, and I think most of our viewers, you know, as an average motorcycle riding person, I think most people probably don't listen to the radio all that much anyway. I think, I mean, I spend all of my time running video and audio through my phone and my headset.
Same. I haven't listened to FM or AM radio in a long time. I actually more commonly listen to weather band radio versus when I'm riding versus AM or FM. Typically, I'm streaming media. Brent, our camera person, is also raising his hand because you are the same way.
Just in case you missed out. We have Brent, the camera guy.
Thanks, Brent.
Thanks, Brent.
So, lost my grandfather when I was 11 years old to cancer, and but my paternal grandfather was a naval aviator in World War II, and he flew the Dauntless, and then he flew the SB-2C Helldiver off the carrier Essex, and he actually earned the Navy Cross April 7th, 1945 during the Battle of Okinawa by scoring a direct hit on the Japanese battleship Yamato. And while he didn't sink her, he helped stop her, and she went to the bottom that day. That was the biggest battleship ever built. He wanted desperately to be a fighter pilot, but he was a dive bomber pilot instead. And 2 weeks after Grandpa passed away, I took my very first flying lesson at 11 years old, and I paid for it with my paper route money. That path took me to the Air Force Academy. I desperately wanted to go to the Naval Academy, but did not get in. I got into the prep school, or I got in directly to the Air Force Academy and chose to come out here to Colorado Springs instead. And that ended up being a great path for me. went off to Air Force pilot training after the Air Force Academy, did UPT down at Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi. Made it all the way through phase 1, phase 2 in the T-37. And then I was a decent enough pilot that they allowed me to track into the fighter track and fly the supersonic T-38. So I was on my way, well on my way, to being a fighter pilot, including 8 solos in that aircraft. And that's a $3.5 million airplane. They don't just toss everybody a set of keys to that. Uncle Sam had literally invested about $1 million in my education at that point. Unfortunately, I ended up getting medically disqualified late, about 9/10 of the way through Air Force pilot training. And my medical disqualification ended up also being a disqualifier for service. So I actually only was able to serve 3.5 years active duty in the Air Force before getting medically separated. At that point, I was lost. I had lost my flying career. I had lost my Air Force career. Moved back here because my ex-wife lived out here in Colorado Springs along with her family. And so that's how we ended up back here. Plus, Colorado Springs is an absolutely beautiful place to live, but I would not recommend that anybody move here because there's a whole lot of people moving here. And we don't need a whole lot more people, but it's a beautiful place to visit. Let's put it that way. And we're spoiled by the roads where we get to ride. I went through several meaningless careers, jobs really, until I found a career in the life insurance business. Did that for about 10 years until it just became unpalatable and I could not do it anymore. Mostly due to the leadership in my last 4 years there after my original boss had passed away. And so I just was pretty miserable in life. I had tried to get back into flying, but it turns out that flying the supersonic T-38 will just suck the fun right out of going and renting a Cessna 172 at the Colorado Springs airport and paying $200 an hour to do it. So that was not an efficient use of my time and resources, and it just wasn't the type of flying that I enjoyed, based on what I had gotten to do in the past. So I was looking for something that was going to be fun and be that adrenaline rush for me. And I had an ATV that I enjoyed riding, but really didn't have a bunch of buddies to go with. And Deb, my girlfriend, had no desire on going with me. So one day I said, "Hey, honey, what if I turn this into a Harley Davidson motorcycle? Would you go riding with me then?" And she said, "Absolutely, I would." And so within a week, I sold that motorcycle, or that ATV. I signed up for the rider training classes. I got my motorcycle endorsement, and I purchased my first motorcycle. And there is nothing else terrestrially that can even approximate the sensation that I had when I was flying as to the adrenaline and the lean and the sense of acceleration that I get on a motorcycle. And then the day Off Delinquents absolutely contributes to that too, because I love leading our rides. And leading the rides, I'm not just riding my motorcycle. I'm riding all the motorcycles in our pack. And it's basically a big, long formation. So it exercises those same brain cells that I had to use when I was in the Air Force, when I was flying in formation. So it's the closest proximity to replicating that type of sensation and the mental exercise that I got when I was flying.
Dave, we've talked a lot about other stuff. Let's get right into this motorcycle. Tell me all about your brand new ride.
Oh man, this thing is an absolute beast. Pound for pound, according to the research that I've done and the experience that I have, this is the most powerful motorcycle stock from Harley Davidson, all told.
Well, and it's not necessarily just the motor either. Dave, why is it pound for pound?
So this Revolution Max 1250cc motor puts out 94 foot-pounds of torque, but it also puts out 150 horsepower. And it's in a very light motorcycle, sub 600 pounds. Mine's probably pushing right around 600 pounds with the bags that I've added to it. But it weighs in at 589 pounds. And when you compare 94 foot-pounds of torque and 150 horsepower to a sub 600 pound motorcycle, it gets up and goes. It's smooth, it's comfortable, it doesn't care whether we're on pavement or we're on dirt. Performs so well on the dirt is it's tall, so you need ground clearance when you're going to be off-road, so that you don't bottom out. And this motorcycle is a legitimate adventure touring motorcycle, but it's not exclusive to people who are 6 foot tall plus. I'm not a tall guy. I'm 5'8", 5'9" in boots. And this motorcycle, the Harley Davidson Pan America Special, is equipped with the adaptive ride height option. That is an innovation that Harley Davidson was first to bring to the marketplace. That's not usually a Harley Davidson characteristic. Harley is usually one of the last brands to bring new technology to the marketplace to let everybody else figure it out, and then once it's been fairly entrenched and adopted, Harley will start implementing it on their motorcycles. In this case, Harley Davidson put the adaptive ride height option on these motorcycles, and it is so damn cool. The first time I experienced it was an absolute jaw-dropping experience. So the suspension in this motorcycle is active, and it changes based on the ride modes that you select. But when you get on the motorcycle and energize the system, it drops the suspension of the motorcycle to its low point of travel, which makes this motorcycle much more accessible for people who aren't super tall. Then when you fire up the motorcycle and you roll down the road, as you ride along, the suspension lifts itself. And it's not abrupt, it's not a jolt, it's very smooth, and it raises it up so that you have maximum ground clearance and cornering capability. This thing has 42-degree lean angles, which is gigantic in the world of motorcycles. You can get this thing almost over at a 45-degree lean, which is huge. Then as you decelerate, the suspension lowers itself automatically with no input from the rider. It just happens. And it hits the low point of travel before it's time for your foot to hit the ground, which is absolutely astounding and so very cool. It makes this motorcycle much more approachable for a whole lot of people. Doug, you had asked about modifications that I've done to this motorcycle. So far, there have not been a lot. The only things that I transferred over from my Zero that I traded in was a cup holder and a phone mount. And then I also wanted to keep my GV 36-liter Trekker Dolomiti pannier boxes. And so I needed to purchase the correct rack to mate those up with the Pan America motorcycle. But the fitment process and installation of this was so much easier because it's a Harley Davidson motorcycle versus the Zero. When I mounted the racks on my Zero, pannier box is often made into a bracket that needs to be installed behind the passenger bags. And on the Harley, the bolts face out. You can access them. Boop, boop, out, bracket in, boop, boop, you're done. On my Zero, there were 4 bolts, but the bolt heads faced inboard of the motorcycle. So I had to get in behind and back that bolt out towards the motor. It just was stupid. And you couldn't get a socket wrench in there because you start to back out and you bump into the motor. You didn't have the clearances. That took me 30 minutes per bolt to get each of those out. So the installation process, being that this is a Harley Davidson motorcycle and being that customizing and modifying your motorcycle is absolutely part of the experience and the culture of Harley Davidson, that was an absolute pleasure last night installing these pannier boxes onto this motorcycle. I do plan on doing a couple of light mods. It does come with all LED forward and rear lighting, as well as the turn signals. But on previous motorcycles, my Zero and my Road Glide Special, I purchased some off-road lights that I put down low as fog lamps, and they can also have different modes to function as emergency flashers. I operate under the premise that anything that can help me both see and be seen, you want to be as conspicuous as possible on the road. I'm all for it, and I'm probably putting it on my motorcycle. So I'm going to be fabricating an installation system to put some additional forward lighting on this motorcycle, and then I'm also going to be looking at doing some probably back of saddlebag mount lights to be tied in with my brake lights to give me a little bit more light in the rear, so that I don't end up as a hood ornament, because I kind of like being able to walk and ride motorcycles.
Is not the same.
Right. My goal is not to sell anybody anything. My goal is to help you figure out exactly which one it is that you want, because you've already decided that you want a motorcycle, right? I'm not going to make anybody decide that they want a motorcycle. That's either part of you or it's not. Yeah. Maybe there are some hurdles that I can help you overcome that are standing between you and taking that leap. But I can't make the want be there. But if the want is there, I can help you get there. So more so than a salesperson, I'm really a professional problem solver. And so maybe that problem is mental. Maybe that problem is financial. Maybe that problem is you don't know what kind of motorcycle would actually fit you best and be able to do the type of riding that you want to be able to do. And so that's where my role comes in, is helping people figure those things out, and then pointing them in the right direction, and then solving any problems that stand in between them and what they want. That's really what I do.
I'm not quite sure if you should have that thing surgically removed or keep it as like something you would hang in your dash. That's how.
Wait.
That's good. That's good.